All right, today we are diving deep into one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, terrifying visions in the Bible, Ezekiel chapter 10. This isn't just a story. It's the moment where God's very presence packs up and leaves the temple in Jerusalem. For the people of Israel, this was everything. It was the ultimate sign that the world as they knew it was about to come crashing down. A truly pivotal, heartbreaking event that sets the stage for judgment.
So this quote right here from verse 4, it really cuts to the heart of the whole thing. Everything else that happens in this chapter, all the strange creatures and spinning wheels, it all orbits around this one single incredibly heavy event, the glory of God leaving the very place it was supposed to be.
Okay, so to make sense of this pretty complex chapter, we're going to break it down just like Ezekiel saw it. We'll start with the command for judgment, then watch as the glory starts to move. We'll check out this wild throne chariot, see the official departure itself, and finally, we'll connect all the dots to his earlier visions. Let's get into it.
Right from the get-go, this vision is not about peace. It kicks off with the terrifying command. In verse 1, an incredible sapphire throne appears. You can think of it as God's command center, and from that seat of absolute authority, a voice gives a startling order.
And then, in verse 2, this figure shows up, a man dressed in linen, and he gets this chilling instruction. Take coals of fire from right there between those heavenly beings, the cherubim, and scatter them all over the city of Jerusalem. Now this is a big deal because it signals a brand new phase of judgment. It's moving beyond what we saw in the last chapter to full-on citywide destruction. You've got to understand what these coals mean. This isn't fire for some holy ritual on an altar. Nope, these are weapons. They're a symbol of God's judgment and purification. And this vision, it's basically a prophecy of exactly what was coming. It's the fire that the Babylonian armies would use to burn Jerusalem and its temple to the ground in 586 BC. Absolutely chilling stuff.
Okay, so let's move on and see how this command actually starts to play out as God's presence begins this solemn departure. The stage is set, the cherubim are on one side of the temple as the man in linen walks in.
Man, verses 3 through 5, they just paint this incredible picture. You have this overwhelming light and sound. There's this cloud, right? It's the Shekinah glory, the literal, visible presence of God, and it just fills the temple. And the sound of the cherubim's wings, it's described as being as powerful as God's own voice. This is all here to show you just how massive, how majestic this presence is. The very same presence that's about to leave. And then verses 6 and 7 show us something really important. This isn't chaos. It's incredibly deliberate. You see a cherub reach out, take the fire, and carefully place it into the hands of the man in linen. It's like a ceremony, a methodical process. These heavenly beings are just following orders, perfectly in sync with God's will.
Okay, now we get to the really wild part, the throne chariot. This is God's, well, for lack of a better word, his vehicle. And Ezekiel gives us this super detailed description, and you can almost feel him realizing, hey, this looks a whole lot like that crazy vision I saw back in chapter 1.
I mean, just try to picture this. A wheel inside another wheel, the whole thing covered in eyes. This is some seriously strange, complex imagery. So you gotta ask, what on earth does it all mean?
Well, every little detail here is symbolic. It tells us something about God. That hand of a man under the wings in verse 8, that's about total, precise, divine control. That famous wheel within a wheel, that means God can go anywhere, in any direction, instantly. No limits. And all those eyes? That's about omniscience, the idea that God sees everything. Nothing is hidden, ever. And the way it all moves perfectly straight? That's about perfect, unwavering obedience. And then, in verse 14, we zoom in on the cherubim themselves. Each one has 4 different faces, and they're all packed with meaning. Now, if you're paying close attention, you might notice a tiny difference from his first vision. There, the first face was an ox. Here, he calls it a cherub.
So what's the deal with the 4 faces? Well, together, they basically represent God's rule over all of creation. The cherub, or the ox, is all about strength and service. The man, that's intelligence. The lion, you guessed it, majesty and power. And the eagle represents speed and, being above it all. It's a complete picture of God's total authority.
And all of this leads right to the climax of the whole chapter. This is the moment. It's solemn, it's heartbreaking, it's the departure. The throne chariot is ready to go and God's glory begins its final exit. But here's what's so important to see. This isn't like flipping a switch. It's not a sudden poof, and he's gone. No, verses 18 and 19 describe this slow, deliberate, step-by-step withdrawal. First, the glory moves from the threshold. Then it hovers over the cherubim. Then the whole chariot lifts off the ground, and finally it stops. It pauses at the east gate. This slow-motion departure just screams how significant this moment is. It's almost as if God is reluctant to leave.
And the meaning of this, it's absolutely devastating. When God's presence leaves, that is the ultimate judgment. The temple is now just a building. It's an empty shell, totally unprotected. Without its king, it's abandoned, and just waiting for the destruction that's about to come.
So as the chapter wraps up, Ezekiel gives us a key piece of context. He connects the dots, linking what he's seeing right now directly to that first big vision he had. In verse 20, he basically says, "Yep, this is it. This is the same living creature I saw back by the river Chebar." He has this aha moment where he realizes those living creatures he saw before were actually cherubim. And that's huge, because it confirms that the message is consistent and it's definitely from God.
He even points out in verse 22 that, yeah, the creatures, the wheels, it all looked the same. The only real difference in how he describes it is calling the ox face a cherub face. And again, this consistency just hammers home the point. This is one unified, deliberate revelation from God.
So what's the big takeaway here? What's the main point? Well, especially for the people this was first written for, the Jewish exiles in Babylon, it's this. God's throne is mobile. His presence isn't locked inside some stone building in Jerusalem. He isn't some local god tied to one place. He is the ruler of the whole earth.
For those exiles, this vision must have been a mix of heartbreaking and hopeful. On one hand, it explained why their beloved temple was going to fall. Because God's glory left, it was vulnerable. But on the other hand, and this is so crucial, it showed them that God hadn't been defeated. The Babylonians didn't win against God. He had simply moved. He was still in charge, still sovereign, and he was still with them, even in a foreign land. And so this ancient, terrifying, and ultimately hopeful vision leaves us with a really big question, one that's just as relevant for us today. If God's presence isn't confined by stone and gold, what does that say about what true worship really is? What does it mean for where and how we connect with the divine? It's a question that really makes you think, doesn't it?